Okay, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to our webinar on migration planning for ArcGIS Enterprise. We're going to spend about an hour discussing some of the methodology and considerations in planning your next upgrade. I'm just going to lean on the old adage. What is it they say? The only inevitables in life are taxes and death, and I think somewhere in between it's having to upgrade your GIS, but hopefully it won't be quite as painful as that. So on today's call, I'm the one on the right. I'm Ewan Crawford. I'm a services manager with Esri Canada in the Vancouver office, and I'm joined by Andrew McMillan. He's a senior consultant team lead, also in services and in the Vancouver office. And Andrew has lots of hands-on experience leading migration planning and execution projects. And that's probably why he's got a little bit less hair than me. So today's session is being recorded. After the session, you should receive an email with a link to the recording. And when we close out, we'd also appreciate your comments and feedbacks on today's session. We are going to be taking questions. You can use the Q&A panel in WebEx. Just a reminder, I think you need to target your questions at all panelists for Andrew and I to be able to see them. We are going to bundle up questions and try and answer them all together at the end, just so we can kind of keep on track for time. So just before I jump into today's agenda, just a couple of comments. I have to break you the news. Unfortunately, there's no demos today. Yeah, I'm sorry. I know you've probably been on lots of Esri Canada webinars and cool 3D and GUAI. Andrew and I are from the service and the delivery side, so a bit more rolling up the sleeves and getting hands dirty. So it's more of a kind of presentation discussion format. Our audience for today, it's non-technical. This is aimed at if you're a GIS analyst, GIS manager, an IT applications manager. The focus today more is on the planning and the methodology for your upgrade. We're, not really going to get into the details of, what's Postgres 11x compatibility with the Geo database. One other comment, we're talking about ArcGIS Enterprise. You're probably familiar, but ArcGIS Enterprise is this sort of the brand name for, I guess, a collection of technologies in our stack, which includes your GIS server, your portal, your data store, your web adapter. If you are an organization that has an architecture running, focused on ArcGIS server, don't worry, you're still in the right webinar. It is just part of the stack. So we have about six and a half kind of topics we're going to go through today. The first one is why upgrade, migrate? I mean, in short, the answer is because you have to at some point, unless you enjoy running unsupported technology and not taking advantage of new capabilities. But there's a whole lot more reasons why you would be considering a migration. We're going to talk about the ArcGIS Enterprise support lifecycle and why that's important for you, because that's going to affect the timing and the frequency of your upgrades. So that's something we think you should be aware of. We'll talk about some of the different flavors or patterns of upgrade/migration. We'll go into some of the considerations in planning. We'll talk about enhancements that we see customers regularly taking advantage of as they do a version upgrade, typically adapting to new features or capabilities. And then we'll talk about a little more detail how to actually create a migration plan. And that's probably the most important thing out of this. However informal or formal, you really should have one of these written down. And then we'll just point you to a few resources that can help you with the migration planning process. So we like polls. Good way to check who's awake in the audience and get a bit of a finger on capabilities. So if you could answer, does your organization have a schedule or plan for keeping ArcGIS Enterprise current? So, a yes, that could be the full range from we do it every 1 or 2 years, kind of depending on needs, or no, we have an IT department that says, we can never be more than 2 major points behind the latest supported version. So there's a range of options could come under yes, or maybe no. Maybe that's why you're here and you're looking for some advice. So just waiting for the poll results to come in, and take a look at the results. And okay, so what have we got? We have got, okay, 40% of you do have a plan of some flavor, 16 don't, and 4% aren't sure. So even this, I guess that 16% of you don't, I guess it's a good sign that you're on the webinar, you are interested in what it might take to put a plan together. So that is good news. And for the 40% that do, hopefully we can, some tips and tricks you might learn today. Okay, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Andrew. He's going to talk about why upgrade or migrate.
Thanks, Ewan, and good morning, everyone. To start, we need to answer the question of why we're doing this, of which there are many reasons that we'll discuss. And for clarification, we need to define a few terms before we get too much further along. When we talk about an upgrade, we're really referring to an in-place version improvement. One would normally do an in-place upgrade when the architecture, hardware, and operating systems are good and don't require change. When we talk about a migration, we're really referring to a shift from one platform to another with an installation of a new version and a migration of services and applications. And often this is required due to an architecture change, hardware improvements, or operating system upgrades. Next slide, please. Determining support for upgrade and migration can fall into the following 4 categories. First, performance. Many organizations lose peak performance and rack up server administration costs when its server infrastructure is not upgraded in a timely fashion. Next, in terms of cost, using older hardware and software versions can often lead to performance drops, which can lead to loss of productivity and reliability, resulting in increased maintenance and operation costs. Other significant drivers to an upgrade or migration is to ensure that all versions of the platform are supported, because running software out of support can be high risk and costly. Capabilities are often a significant motivator to upgrade, allowing access to new functionality, whether that's new tools, application templates, or mobile applications. Also, moving to infrastructure, new infrastructure, particularly cloud-based infrastructure, can provide numerous technical advantages, including elastic scalability, flexible server capacity, persistent storage, and possibly cloud-native databases. Security, often upgrades provide an opportunity to ensure your platform is secure, using the latest security protocols and standards. For example, in recent years, ensuring all platforms are using SSL and our proper versions of TLS protocols have been significant. Next slide, please.
Okay, I did say we like polls. So here's a second. Which version of ArcGIS Enterprise are you currently using? So it's an anonymous poll. There's no trouble if you're on 10.5x or older. We're not going to judge you. Though it may mean your next upgrade's a little more involved when you get a few versions behind. Certainly we've seen a lot of customers moving from 10.5x in the last couple of years onto 10.8. So just waiting for the results to come in here. I couldn't really guess what the spread will be. I think I guess be pretty even between the 4. So, and I was just, I was almost right.
Ah, very close.
Yeah, no, it's good. So I guess we have 21% each on 10.6 or 10.7. We have 18% 10.5 or older and 11% on 10.8. So I guess most of you are in the 10.6 to 10.7. So that's interesting. So I guess, anyone who's on 10.5, 10.6, you're probably going to be thinking of doing an upgrade soon. 10.7.8, you've definitely got a few years left, but That's a good lead into the next our next topic. So I'm going to talk about the ArcGIS Enterprise Support Lifecycle. So if you may already be familiar with this, but if you're not, it's important because this is the schedule that defines the technical and product support you receive for Enterprise, and it's a schedule that doesn't move. It's kind of set in stone, so this will affect the frequency and timing of your upgrades as well as your target version. I know we all do projects, and often the end date's a little bit flexible, but with the support lifecycle, they're fairly well-defined, non-movable dates here. So what I'm going to talk about on this slide, all the information I'm about to give you is actually available at the support matrix, at the link at the bottom. And I've provided a kind of snapshot of that for, in this case, 10.7. But just a little bit of the terminology. So there's the product, ArcGIS Enterprise, actually all Esri products are available. It will be at one level of support in the life cycle. And those are the phases. So general, extended, mature, and retired. And on the graphic there, those correspond to the columns. And there's a reason two of those are in italics, because that's the point at which your support really gets quite limited, and there's some risk for you. It might be manageable risk, but you should be aware of it. So essentially what it means is when you general availability, so that's 10.8.1 today. So that means you have full access to technical support. You can open a case, they'll help you. You have lots of online resources. It also means the software, for software support, in the event of bugs or issues, there may be updates or hot fixes. There'll be new environment certifications. So, a new OS or a new version of an RDBMS, 8.1 will be tested and certified against those new versions. So after a period of time, you could then, if you're in 10.8.1, it will shift into extended support. And it's very similar to general support, except there's no new environment certification. So that means you're basically rev locked at the version of, let's say, SQL Server or the version of Windows Server, Postgres that you deployed on. Sometime after that, you're going to move into mature support. And what this means is you can still call tech support. They'll open a case. They will try and help you out, but there's no additional software support. So there's going to be no hot fixes or changes to the technology. Now, maybe that's okay. Maybe that's a risk you can live with. Maybe you can manage that, but it's for sure it's something you should be aware of. And then finally, your version of Enterprise is going to drop into retired mode. So this one you have access to the online resources, but you're kind of on your own at this point. And this is obviously the greatest level of risk for any sort of like enterprise piece of software. So those are the four phases. The second kind of interesting part is the speed with which you move through those phases. And this gets us on to the software versions. So as of 10.7, Esri introduced the release cycles based on major point and minor point releases. So, for example, 10.7 or 10.7.1. What's interesting is the major point releases, like 10.7 or 10.8, basically have a 3 years of support until you go into the retired phase. Okay? For the minor point releases, you essentially have 6 years of support until you move into the retired phase. Now, 3 years might sound like a lot of time, well, 3 years, that's a fair amount. But, if you didn't, let's say you deployed 10.8 and you deployed it 6 months after it had been released, and you'd like to upgrade to the next version 6 months before it becomes retired. Well, now you've lost a year, and then by 6 months of migration planning, maybe you're into a year and a half. So, effectively that 3 years can creep up on you fairly fast. So, for most customers, we are recommending going with a minor point release, at least for a system of any size. If you have a smaller deployment with fewer users, maybe you can be a bit more nimble in your upgrades and do them more frequently, and you can go with a major point. So anyway, I think this is something worth worth knowing because this is going to affect your planning. So in services, I guess we've kind of identified kind of three main types of upgrade or patterns, and Andrew kind of alluded to this, and the difference between what's an upgrade and a migration. But they're really a continuum of, sort of changes in your business. You're growing your GS to, accommodate new use cases, probably increase load, and associated with that architectural changes and probably increased complexity and time to execute a migration. So the kind of simplest one we call an upgrade. This is where, there's no real change to your business or technology environment. Maybe you do some web mapping, you have a number of users using Pro and you're making, information products, maps and reports and charts. And you're really just, your focus is on moving up a version or two to extend your technical support window. And that's fine. That might be valid for your organization. The kind of next level up we'd call a rehost. This is where there's some change to your business. It may be that you are planning to have contractors go out and do field inspections, and there's going to be 50 of these types of users, and your GS doesn't support that today either through capacity or security. So you're going to have to think about, well, not only are we going to upgrade the version, but maybe we need new hardware. Maybe we'll upgrade to a new version of our DBMS while we're at it. You might also use this as an opportunity to take a custom web app and look at, well, I built this a number of years ago. What could I do today with, how would I migrate this to Web App Builder, or maybe Experience Builder? Maybe there's out-of-the-box widgets or functionality that could reduce the amount of custom code. And then the third one we call a re-architecture. This is where significant changes to your business. Maybe integrating your system with a financial system. Maybe as your GS gets used in more of an enterprise capacity, your IT department are now asking you to plan for disaster recovery. If it's people use this system day to day to, support their, daily business, and the system goes down, that's a significant impact to your organization. In the unfortunate event that there's a ransomware attack, how can you restore your GS? Maybe high availability to, again, support, increased load. And maybe other factors like your organization's also forming a cloud adoption strategy. So, maybe we're going to move our publication environment into Azure. In this case, there's going to be significant architectural work to be done in addition to, porting what you have today, existing capabilities onto a new version. So, all these moving parts and considerations, how do you actually plan for migration? I'm going to talk about a little bit of high level here. Andrew will go into some more detail. But kind of essentially three phases, understand, plan, and act. And I think that, the kind of stating the obvious, don't go straight to act because there's risk and potentially can be a bit expensive for you if you skip the understand and the plan. You should understand and plan, however informal. Notes, it's like a simple Word document that two people read, or maybe you're going to have a formal Microsoft execution plan and Microsoft project that you share with your IT department ahead. There's all different levels of how formally you might write this down or capture it, but I guess our tip is make sure you go through the understand the plan phases. The least fun scenario is you start upgrading your production system on a Friday evening, and Sunday comes around, and you know what? It's just still not working. There's something that you can't get right. It seemed to work okay in test, but your test and your production environments are different. And then you're kind of Monday's, a number of hours away, and you're going to have 100 people back in the office all expecting their mobile app or their web app to be available. And then you're faced with a rollback, and that's not the position you want to find yourself in. So I guess, the understand phase, this is really, determining your kind of business and technical objectives. We see a very wide range here. It might be that your organization using CityWorks for asset management, and you need a new version of CityWorks because there's something in the mobile app. But that's going to drag along an upgrade because that version of CityWorks requires, let's say, Enterprise 10.7.1, and that's a perfectly valid driver for an upgrade. So we see increasingly organizations adopting cloud strategies, typically a hybrid, where system of record tends to remain on premises, but some part, say the publication environment, moves to the cloud. And again, that might be, it's not driven by the GS department, that's driven by the IT department. We also see customers who, they deployed Enterprise a number of years ago and they had this nice, elegant, scalable architecture, but you know what? Turns out it had been a bit over-engineered. And, with the number of servers and links, it's just, too much administration effort for the GIS or IT capacity. So they're looking to simplify it and, deploy a simpler, more manageable architecture. These are all perfectly good, valid goals, and ones that should be discussed and documented up front. Then you get into the planning stage, and this is really the rolling up your sleeves. This is where most of the hard work is done. This is the work where you will do things like make an inventory of all your servers, your ArcGIS technology, the versions, applications, custom apps, third-party apps that you integrate with. You start checking version dependencies. I'm planning to go to 10.8.1. Is that going to work with our version of Oracle or Postgres? And as you start kind of, shaking out a sort of plan, you're also going to start identifying, which resources are required to participate in the upgrade. You might be a small department where, you're a 1 or 2 person GS shop and, you can do this yourself. If you're a larger organization, you're likely going to have IT involved. So they need to know, when do they have a systems analyst available to, run a backup or be available on call as you execute the actual upgrade. You're going to think about things like, risk planning. What happens if, it doesn't work and you have to do a rollback? You need a backup for that. And then by the time you get to the act, hopefully, I wouldn't say this is the easy part, but you've hoped by the time you get to this stage, there should be less surprises. You should have, reduced your risk here and, I guess reduced the amount of effort and time to actually, do the execution. Okay, so it's a webinar, so we're going to do another poll. Kind of following on from some of these discussion topics, could you let us know what would be the main objectives for your next enterprise upgrade? I realize this list here is not exhaustive, and you may have many objectives, but we are interested to see which of the following 4 would be a driver for your next upgrade. I guess D kind of being the most, maybe, most like the upgrade, these changes to your business. A, B, and C could fit under a rehost or a re-architecture type upgrade. So just waiting for the results to come in here. And okay, we have a pretty good spread. So I guess the winner is 36% going for some added or enhanced functionality. That's pretty much what we'd expect. Next is 21% improving performance and capacity. Yes, we hear that lots. 16% moving to extended product support, and 5% going for identity model. And I guess the identity model, it may be, you're already at 10.7.1 and you adopted the identity model, a while ago, so that's not a significant part of your upgrade. But that's an interesting spread, yeah, and all good reasons for an upgrade. Okay, so I am going to hand over to Andrew at this point.
Thanks, Ewan. Now that we've covered the why and how to plan your next migration, it's important to define what's in scope. Aside from the obvious of installing and upgrading to new versions of software, a migration also allows you the opportunity to implement enhancements to your GIS workflows and architecture. So this is the point where we really get to improve things and make things better. Next slide, please. The things you can do to add value to your organization's GIS is endless. However, the following list is a common list of enhancements that you may want to include, and these are things that we have been commonly seeing amongst clients. In terms of increased capacity and cloud usage, so likely over the years your GIS services and usage of those services has increased, so now could be the time to make improvements to support those capacities. Aside from other benefits, one way to future-proof yourself from capacity limitations is to migrate some or all of your architecture to cloud-based platforms. This is becoming much more common in recent years, with Canadian providers having Canadian hosted facilities. Architecture changes and base deployments. So during a migration is often a good time to evaluate your architecture and make changes to increase uptime, provide better performance, and hopefully reduce administration. To help with this, Esri Canada has designed 2 base deployments suited for small and medium-sized local governments. In terms of small, I'd classify that as under 20,000 and a medium 20 to 100,000. These architectures have been primarily designed to meet the requirements of local governments but can be adopted to other verticals as well with minimal modification. Through Esri Canada's professional services, we'd be happy to review the details of these base deployments. If you're a larger organization, we would recommend involving one of our solution architects to design architecture that is scaled accordingly for your needs. Azure AD. In recent years, we have been finding that Azure AD is becoming very common amongst customers as an identity store. Often this has been driven by the move of organizations to Office 365, which requires Azure AD. Using Azure AD as an identity store is a clean and secure way to manage your user access and identity with ArcGIS Enterprise with minimal configuration. Imagery is likely playing a powerful role in your organization's GIS due to playing a large role in your organization. And due to large file sizes and compounding data sets from yearly captures, you're likely experiencing high storage and administration costs to provide access. Simplification of these workflows can be made possible by using mosaic data sets and the image server role. Implementing these changes often fits nicely into a migration plan. In terms of application migrations, this more often refers to migrating apps from ArcGIS Online to on-premise ArcGIS Enterprise. Often, part of a migration is to implement ArcGIS Enterprise on-premise to enhance an organization's internal usage of WebGIS. With the full capabilities of Enterprise on-premise, clients will likely migrate their internal focused ArcGIS Online applications to on-premise to take advantage of simplified data management while maintaining data sets held within their on-premise system of record. To do this, Esri has a number of tools to assist with the migration of ArcGIS Online items to on-premise. During a migration, it's often a good time to migrate your application or to rebuild your application. So migrating to a GIS architecture or just new versions of ArcGIS Enterprise can trigger this opportunity to rebuild or redesign internal or public applications to take advantage of new application frameworks, whether that's Web App Builder, Experience Builder, GeoCortex Essentials, or possibly even a custom application using the JavaScript API. Security model governance improvements. Often in migration is a good opportunity to review your security model within the geodatabase and or within ArcGIS Enterprise, and to have a look at governance to determine if improvements can be made in how you're managing your content. Lastly, community maps. In recent years, Esri Canada has been putting significant effort into building a national base map that clients can freely use. Possibly this is the time to implement. The Community Map of Canada is a base map of Canada built from authoritative data collected closest to source and updated daily. This base map is delivered using a vector tile service, offering fast performance and high cartographic quality. Best of all, Esri will pre-process and host your data at no cost to you. If you're interested in this, please contact your account manager or the Community Maps program. Next slide, please. At this point, we should know why and what we are migrating to. But now we need to know how to develop and execute the plan. So this is where the smoke really starts to come out of Homer's ears. But don't worry, these following steps will help simplify the process. Next slide, please. By following this high-level overview, you can guide your organization through the planning process and get to a point where you can act and execute your migration plan. To begin with, you need to identify stakeholders. These can be individuals or groups that are impacted or will be participating. Identifying stakeholders allows you to involve them early, which helps to provide buy-in and support throughout the project. Define business and technical objectives. Defining these objectives will help you keep track of the most important outcomes that will give you a baseline to measure the success of a project against. Also important step would be to examine potential risks and assumptions. By examining risks, it will give you an opportunity to explore the potential things that could go wrong and provide insight to ways to migrate or remove such risk if or as they appear. Review your current architecture and confirm the future architecture. This is where you review, identify any issues in that design, and confirm a design. This step will help provide a clear visual to what the destination state is looking like. Next, identifying required hardware and software. Once you have a confirmed design, the next phase would be to list the required platforms. Often this phase is overlooked, but is a good opportunity to review your hardware requirements with your IT department to ensure that there is enough virtual host or that the proper physical or cloud-based infrastructure can be provisioned on time. Also, important this time would be to verify that all software licenses are available, whether that's Esri software, Microsoft operating systems, any other operating systems, or your relational databases. Often, failure to spend time making sure that these requirements are in place can lead to delays during execution time. It's well worth the time to discuss early. Next slide, please. Next is a larger task. So this is identifying in-scope tasks and identifying exclusions. So almost more important than identifying the in-scope is identifying the exclusion. So a common mistake with many organizations is to take on too much at once, and often it really helps to determine what lower priority items can be postponed until later to keep the project scope clearly defined, and will help the migration be focused and shorten the duration as much as possible. Schedule tasks in logical order. Here is where we define tasks, break down into phases, determine what tasks can be run in parallel, and assign resources. Often MS Project is a good tool for this. This will be heavily used during the execution. Once the project team is identified, a skills inventory should be performed to help identify any missing skill sets that will be required for project execution time. Knowing these gaps allows you to modify resources or gives you time to source the appropriate training for those individuals. And finally, review and execute. Circulate the plan with the project team, collect feedback, finalize the plan, and now you're ready to act. Next slide.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. So I guess the next couple of slides, we've identified a combination of resources that can help you with your migration planning and execution. Please don't try and memorize or scribble down these URLs. You will get a copy of these slides. In no particular order, like we use these in services, kind of an ongoing basis. Identify, new capabilities and new versions. Always kind of adds sort of rationales for target versions. 10.8.1 allows, new features in ArcGIS Enterprise sites, for example. And that's something you'd like to deploy internally as kind of your internal portal for content and apps. And that could be a driver for your next upgrade, for example. I've listed a couple of recommended training courses here. Now, you may already, your next upgrade might be your second or third upgrade of Enterprise, and you feel yourself or your team are fairly proficient in Enterprise, and that's good. I guess one thing we found is that most customers, unfortunately, only get to do an upgrade, maybe every 2 years or 3 years. Maybe fortunately, we only upgrade every 2 or 3 years. But I guess the downside of doing it infrequently is that you don't get to practice. And that's probably the only time you will ever do an upgrade, with that target version of the software. So, with those gaps between doing, installs or upgrades, you can, lose your skills a bit. So, some of these courses are recommended, even if only for some refresher training. That gives you the opportunity to spend a day or a couple of days hands-on working with the latest version of the software or latest -1. Which, a day or two of efforts, fairly low cost for some, risk management so that your execution is more successful when you're ready. I mentioned Esri Canada user conferences. I mean, that's not a place you're going to go and get information on detailed migration planning, but, it's a good venue to see some of the latest and greatest capabilities in Enterprise, like ArcGIS Enterprise sites that could be one of the, objectives or drivers for your next upgrade. Unfortunately, due to COVID, our conferences are all virtual for the foreseeable future, but I do encourage you to attend those. And just lastly, if you felt you needed some help, you weren't comfortable either doing architecture, planning, execution, we're available here in professional services. We have a number of packages that we can help you with. But either way, we hope some of the planning and methodological components here would at least help you to assist you and do this on your own. Okay, so Andrew has been diligently watching the Q&A panel. Andrew, I'm going to hand over to you. Any interesting questions from the group?
Yes, thanks. We have a number of questions here. So maybe to start, we have one question here. Are we able to upgrade directly from 10.2.1 to 10.7.1, or would we need to do a two-step upgrade? I presume in this case we're talking about ArcGIS Server, not ArcGIS Desktop. So in terms of ArcGIS Server, there is a direct upgrade from that. However, I would suggest you look at some other things like version of your operating system. I would suspect that ArcGIS Server on a 10.2.1 is probably running Windows 2012. This is out of support or will be soon out of support. So it might make more sense to do more of a migration, a build of a new operating system and installation of 10.7.1.
Yeah, I didn't think to put a 10.2.x option in our poll, but remember that for next time.
That's right. How do we access base deployments for local governments? Good question. I think the best way, it does require a little bit of discussion, and it's not something that we kind of post on the website. So I think for that, the best option would be to contact Esri Canada Professional Services and put you in touch with a proper technical resource to go over those details. Which online app has the closest look and feel to ArcMap? Tough question. I would say none of them.
I think that's probably a good thing.
And I think there's a reason for that. Common mistake is for people to rebuild a desktop technology in a browser. Doing so results in a very kind of difficult to use UI and not focused to the end user group. So I'm not quite sure why you'd want all that functionality in a browser, but often it makes much more sense to create focused application with focused tools for certain groups within the organization. Terminology check. Is ArcGIS Enterprise what we previously called Portal for ArcGIS, distinct from Server Desktop So no, ArcGIS Enterprise is kind of a collection of projects. It's products, a portal for ArcGIS, ArcGIS Server, 2 web adapters, and a data store.
And I think, Andrew, maybe in earlier versions there were, I think, they were kind of branded and installed separately. And so ArcGIS Enterprise is the brand now for that collection of technologies, and they all, they all work together. They talk to each other more seamlessly than they would have, even a few major point versions ago.
Right. One question here. How often do you recommend an organization upgrades their environment to the most current version? Good question. Difficult answer, but for all, but generally would recommend that smaller organizations with single machine deployments with smaller number of desktop users, that they upgrade to a minor point release. So that would be, in this case, most recently 10.8.1. Probably every year makes sense because the effort is relatively small to access new functionality. For medium-sized clients, every 2 years probably makes sense, I think, because migrations need to be more carefully planned and take a little more time. Then for larger organizations, it gets a little more complicated because of the ability to change is often harder, but I would suggest targeting for the 2 to 3 year range, I think makes sense.
I think I'm just looking for the best question.
There's lots here.
Yeah. I'd say, I think we've got time for probably two or three more.
2 or 3 more. Also, will there be a Canadian version of ArcGIS Online soon? I don't think you can field that one.
Is there anyone else I can pass that on to? I guess it may happen, but I don't believe there is any. There's a date in the product roadmap, and my understanding, the reason is that ArcGIS Online, regular is hosted on both Azure and Amazon servers. Both Amazon and Microsoft have data centers in Canada, but I think they don't have the full, I forget the technical term, but it's essentially the backup capability. So they have data centers, but they have to have the backup or the replication in different regions. And I don't think the Canadian data centers support that yet. So that's the limitation. I believe once that is supported by Amazon and Microsoft, then there would likely be a firm plan for ArcGIS Online to, at least the option to run ArcGIS Online solely hosted within Canada.
Okay. My organization is currently developing a cloud strategy and will be adopting Office 365. What options are there for cloud deployments for enterprise install on Canadian hosted services? That means platforms. So I guess in Canada we have the large ones are Azure and Amazon, and both have Canadian hosted facilities. For the people on the West Coast, I know Amazon doesn't have a West Coast facility available yet, but I think it will in the spring. So that might be a consideration when dealing with network latency. Another question. So how common is it that customers are able to upgrade their environments without involvement from Esri? So organizations with smaller architectures and training are often able to migrate on their own. Definitely Esri Canada can perform full migrations, but most oftentimes this is a joint effort between clients where we can help with the migration and planning and then split the tasks between the organization and Esri just to be a little more cost effective and provide some knowledge transfer.
And just, hey, Andrew, just to comment, I mean, I guess, we do support a lot of organizations doing the upgrade, but I mean, often it's, a decision on the customer's part that, you have a GIS team, a finite size, and, there's an unlimited number of things you could be doing, building new apps or, mobile apps for your end users, promoting the use of GIS in the organization. And, how do you balance your time between that, the tangibles, the end, useful products that your organization sees versus the necessary, kind of GS administration upgrades. And, and we like it when customers, they involve us, but partly because they can focus on the, the deployment and the usage side of it rather than administration. And again, because, there is some risk when you don't do an upgrade very often, right? This could be the first and only time you upgrade to 10.7.1 or 10.8.1. So, we like it when customers spend less of their time in administration, not to drive our services business, but because that results in them having more time to make better use of the GS and do, build really good, apps and information products. Andrew.
Great. We've got time for a couple more questions here. Will Esri support the use of containerization in the future? So good question. Definitely, Esri has been developing deployment of ArcGIS Enterprise using containerization and Kubernetes. I think, I'm not sure where it is in the release cycle, but it's definitely in the works and something that you'll hear more about in years to come.
Yeah, don't quote me on this. I believe there is some release planned for January 2021. But again, you would have to be an organization that uses, containerization as your deployment strategy. It's not going to be for everyone. It's a bit of a buzzword, and probably most small and mid-sized, maybe even large organizations wouldn't be able to take advantage of a Kubernetes-ready enterprise quite yet, just simply because the organization doesn't support it for other apps either. But yeah, for sure, it's in the product roadmap, and I should be available next year.
Okay. Next question. Does ArcGIS Enterprise on-premise fresh new installation need a database, Microsoft SQL database, ready for installation? No, not necessarily. Quite often these days, organizations will have a cluster for the relational database, and as long as there's capacity on that cluster, whether it's Oracle or SQL Server, even if it's not a cluster, it can just be a standalone SQL Server already in use in the organization. Often is enough availability on that instance to install your Enterprise geodatabase on there.
Okay, Andrew, how about we do one more? Give us the best one.
Do you see one there? By saying Azure AD, do you support AWS AD? That's a good question. I don't know that one. Too technical. For some of these questions, if we don't get to them, please kind of send us an email, and I can do some of them require a little bit of research.
Yeah, I mean, just a comment. I mean, we see most customers that we work with, at least, would be deploying to Azure over Amazon. I mean, that's not a recommendation on our part. Probably a factor that a lot of organizations already have enterprise agreements with Microsoft, and I think Azure just kind of rolls into that. So for sure, we probably have more experience with Azure than Amazon. I think Amazon you see tend to be more commercial customers likely to be deploying, but yeah, I guess that's a question for us to follow up on. Okay, thanks, Andrew. So I'm going to roll over actually to our last slide. So that's all Andrew and I have for today. Thank you for attending. Hopefully you got some value in the session. And as mentioned earlier, today's recording will be available to you at the URL or through the email. And if you have any questions about anything to do with the migration, feel free to give Andrew or myself a shout. amcmillan@esri.ca or ecrawford@esri.ca. And yeah, thanks, and hope to talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy your day.